The Millionaire's Discovery, a story of hidden talents and unexpected bonds. Julian Lombardi lived his life with clockwork precision. Every detail of his wealthy existence was carefully orchestrated, from his business dealings to the management of his grand estate. Control was his constant companion, and surprises were unwelcome guests in his meticulously planned world. On this particular afternoon, as he walked through the elegant hallways of his mansion, something unusual caught his attention through the expansive windows facing the garden. What he witnessed would completely disrupt his ordered reality. His 12-year-old son, Leonardo, was engaged in an activity Julian had never seen before: dancing. But the boy was not alone in this endeavor. Accompanying him was Isabella, the household cook whom Julian had barely acknowledged since her employment began half a year earlier. The scene was so extraordinary that Julian questioned his own vision. There they were, moving in harmonious rhythm across the lawn. Leonardo's steps were uncertain and awkward, yet his face radiated a joy Julian hadn't witnessed in years. Since losing his mother, Leonardo had withdrawn into himself, becoming a shadow of his former self. Now, here he was, laughing freely because of this woman. Isabella demonstrated movements with a grace that seemed incongruous with her role as kitchen staff. Her every gesture was controlled and purposeful, not casual play, but the instruction of someone with professional training. She wasn't simply entertaining a child's fantasy. She was genuinely teaching him. A wave of discomfort washed over Julian. He disapproved of any employee wielding such influence over his son. His irritation mounting with each passing moment, Julian decided to intervene. Straightening his posture, he marched outside, his footsteps echoing sharply on the stone pathway. Upon noticing his approach, both Isabella and Leonardo became aware of his presence. The boy immediately tensed, his earlier happiness evaporating into anxiety. Isabella, however, maintained her composure, simply wiping her hands on her apron before meeting Julian's stern gaze. "What exactly is happening here?" Julian's voice carried its characteristic coldness and control. Leonardo lowered his eyes, but Isabella faced him directly without hesitation. "We were practicing, sir," she replied with simple honesty. "Practicing what, precisely?" Julian demanded. "Your son expressed interest in learning dance," she explained. Turning his attention to Leonardo, Julian asked, "Since when?" The boy hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. "For some time now," he admitted quietly. A sharp pang of guilt pierced Julian's chest. He had never noticed, never inquired. "Why didn't you inform me?" Julian pressed. Leonardo started to shrug, but Isabella intervened. "Because he had no practice partner," she stated firmly. There was something unwavering in her tone that further irritated Julian. "This isn't part of your job description," he declared. "No, it isn't," Isabella agreed calmly. "Then why are you doing it?" She crossed her arms, her expression remaining neutral. "Because he asked me to," she replied simply. Julian turned back to his son. "Is this accurate?" Leonardo nodded. A heavy silence settled between them. Julian exhaled slowly, frustration clawing at his composure. Though he had no logical reason for his agitation, he felt deeply unsettled. Something about this situation felt incomplete, as if he was missing crucial information. This was intolerable. His gaze returned to Isabella. "I need to speak with you privately." Leonardo looked between them with obvious concern, but Isabella remained unperturbed. "As you wish, sir." Julian turned abruptly and headed back toward the house without waiting for her to follow. However, as he stepped inside, he glanced back over his shoulder. Leonardo leaned toward Isabella, whispering something. She responded quietly, her expression unreadable, and the boy managed a small, conspiratorial smile. A chill ran down Julian's spine. There was definitely more to this situation than met the eye, and he was determined to uncover the truth. Julian sat in his office, fingers pressed together beneath his chin as he stared at his computer screen. The information displayed was both mundane and troubling. Isabella Ruiz, 29 years old, employed as a cook on his estate 6 months prior. No criminal background, no concerning history, nothing that raised immediate red flags. By all appearances, she was exactly what she seemed to be, a household employee who performed her duties and avoided trouble. Yet Julian couldn't shake the feeling that there was more beneath the surface. Something hidden that his instincts insisted was there. Those same instincts had built his business empire by recognizing when things weren't as they appeared. Now, those instincts screamed that Isabella was more than just a cook. He entered her name into a broader search, adding a keyword that had been nagging at him since witnessing her dance. Isabella Ruiz ballerina. Initially, nothing appeared. Then, buried among articles and unrelated results, he found it. A news story from 7 years past. Julian leaned forward, scanning the headline. Young ballet prodigy vanishes from the stage without explanation. His pulse quickened. He clicked the link, and as the page loaded, a photograph of a much younger Isabella appeared on screen. She was dressed in an immaculate white ballet costume, standing on a grand stage with arms raised in perfect form. Her expression was serene and confident, nothing like the reserved cook who worked in his kitchen. The article described a rising star in the ballet world, a dancer with exceptional talent. She had performed in prestigious venues and stood on the threshold of an international career. Then, suddenly, without scandal or public incident, she disappeared from the spotlight. No interviews, no explanations, simply gone. Julian sat back in his chair, exhaling sharply. Why would someone with such talent abandon their future? How did she end up cooking in his house? Questions accumulated, and he knew he wouldn't find answers by staring at a screen. He needed to hear the truth directly from her. Standing abruptly, he left his office and made his way to the kitchen. Isabella was there as expected, methodically cleaning countertops. She looked up as he entered, her expression neutral but guarded. "Mr. Lombardi," she greeted, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Is there something you need?" Julian wasted no time. He pulled out his phone and placed it on the counter, displaying the article about her on the screen. "Care to explain this?" For the first time since meeting her, he saw genuine surprise flicker across her face. It was brief but unmistakable. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked at the screen, then back at him. "You've been investigating me?" Her voice was calm, but something careful lay beneath it. Julian folded his arms. "I don't appreciate mysteries in my home." Isabella exhaled slowly and set down the dish towel. For a moment, he thought she might refuse to answer. Then, after a long pause, she spoke. "I suppose I should have anticipated this," she said quietly. "You're not the type of man who leaves questions unanswered." Julian remained silent, waiting. She looked at the article again, her fingers brushing against the counter's edge. "I was a dancer," she admitted. "A long time ago." "You were more than just a dancer," Julian corrected. "You were a star." A bitter smile touched her lips. A star that burned out before it could truly shine. Julian studied her carefully. Why did you leave? She hesitated. He could see the internal conflict in her eyes, the way she weighed whether to reveal the truth. Finally, she sighed. Because I lost everything. Her voice was quieter now, more vulnerable than he had ever heard it. He didn't push, simply waited for her to continue. When I was 22, dance was my entire universe. It was all I knew, all I cared about, she said. I trained relentlessly, pushing myself beyond all limits because I believed I was destined for greatness. She paused, then added, and I wasn't alone in this journey. Julian frowned. Who else? My fiancé, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian. He was also a dancer. We had trained together since childhood. We were going to conquer the world together. We were offered an international tour, a dream we had worked toward our entire lives. Something in her tone made Julian's stomach tighten. He already sensed where this was leading. The day before our most important performance, Adrian was struck by a car, she continued, her eyes unfocused, lost in memory. He died instantly. Julian remained silent. The weight of her words settled between them, heavy and undeniable. After that, I couldn't dance, she said. I couldn't even listen to music without feeling like part of me had been torn away. Everything I had built my life around was gone. So I disappeared. Julian let her words sink in. He had expected something tragic, but not this, not grief so raw. It had driven her to abandon her entire identity. So you became a cook, he asked, not unkindly. Isabella let out a breath of bitter amusement, though there was no real humor in it. I needed something completely removed from dance, something practical, something safe. Julian exhaled, rubbing his hand over his face. And now? She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. Now I teach your son. The words hit him harder than expected. He knew she didn't mean it as a challenge, but it felt like one. She had walked away from dance, yet, for some reason, she had chosen to share it with Leonardo. Why? What made her decide to break her own rule for his son? You could have continued ignoring it, Julian said slowly. Why help him? She hesitated, then said, because he reminds me of myself at his age. Julian stiffened. How? Isabella's expression softened. Because he doesn't smile, Mr. Lombardi. The words hit like a physical blow. Julian clenched his jaw, unable to deny the truth in them. His son had been fading since his mother's death, retreating into himself, into books and routines. He had thought providing Leonardo with stability and security was sufficient, but Isabella had seen something he had missed. He smiles when he dances, she added, and I think he just needed someone to listen. Julian swallowed hard, turning away slightly. He had spent years ensuring his son had everything he needed, except perhaps the one thing that mattered most. After a moment, he exhaled. And what do you plan to do? Isabella tilted her head. Do you mean, will I push him to dance as if it's some kind of solution to everything? She shook her head. No, I just want him to feel something again. The rest is up to him. Julian sat with that for a long moment, absorbing everything. He had always prided himself on maintaining control, on knowing everything that happened in his house. Yet somehow, he had been blind to the most important thing of all, his own son's happiness. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. I don't like people interfering with my family. Isabella didn't flinch. And I don't like seeing children who have forgotten how to be children. A thick silence stretched between them. Julian had no response because, in the depths of his mind, he knew she was right. Leonardo stood before his father in the grand dining room, his hands clenched into small fists as he gathered courage to speak. The chandeliers above cast warm light over the table, but the tension in the air was unmistakable. Julian Lombardi sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable as he watched his son shift nervously. Finally, Leonardo took a deep breath and spoke. "I want to compete in a dance tournament." The silence that followed was suffocating. Julian placed his silverware down with deliberate slowness, his sharp gaze locking onto his son's face. "A dance tournament," he repeated, as if testing the words. Leonardo nodded, standing firm. "Yes, I want to compete." Julian exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "And when did you decide this?" Leonardo hesitated only briefly. "Some time ago. I've been training with Isabella, and she believes I'm ready." Julian's eyes flickered with something unreadable at the mention of Isabella. "Does she?" His tone was neutral, but Leonardo didn't waver. "Yes, and I believe I am too." Julian looked at his son, truly looked at him, and saw something that hadn't been there before. A fire, a determination that went beyond mere childish excitement. But it didn't erase the concerns twisting in his chest. "You realize this isn't a game, Leonardo. Competitions aren't about enjoyment. They're about discipline, pressure, and expectation." Leonardo straightened his back. "I know, and I'm ready for that." Julian stared at him for a long moment. Then, finally, he exhaled. "Fine, but if you're going to do this, you do it properly. No half measures. You commit completely." Leonardo's face lit up with a grin so wide and genuine that it stunned Julian momentarily. "Thank you, Dad." Later that evening, Julian found Isabella in the kitchen, carefully chopping vegetables with the precision of someone accustomed to structure and discipline. She glanced up as he entered, already sensing why he was there. "You knew he would ask me," Julian said, folding his arms. Isabella wiped her hands on a towel before turning to face him. "I suspected." "Do you think he's ready?" Isabella tilted her head slightly. "He has the passion and drive. The discipline will develop with time." Julian exhaled slowly, his fingers tapping against the counter. If he does this, he will experience failure and rejection. He may not be able to handle that. Isabella studied him for a moment before speaking, "Or perhaps you're the one who isn't ready to handle it." Julian's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he said, "If we proceed with this, we do it correctly. That means you will train him properly. No gentle encouragements. He needs to be challenged." Isabella's lips curved slightly. "I wasn't planning to go easy on him." The next morning, training officially began. Julian watched from the sidelines as Isabella transformed from the soft-spoken cook into a strict, focused mentor. Leonardo moved through exercises with determination. His forehead was beaded with sweat as Isabella corrected his posture, foot placement, and rhythm. "Again," she ordered, her voice firm but never harsh. "You missed the beat." Leonardo wiped his brow and started over. Julian, watching from the doorway, couldn't help but notice how much his son had changed. Before, he had been quiet and hesitant, always following rather than leading. Now, there was a stubborn edge to him, a refusal to give up even when things didn't come easily. Hours passed, and when the session ended, Leonardo collapsed onto the floor, breathing heavily. Isabella handed him a water bottle, which he accepted gratefully. "You did well today," she said simply. Leonardo grinned up at her. "That means a lot, coming from you." Julian remained silent, watching their interaction with an odd sense of unease. It wasn't jealousy this time. It was something deeper, something he couldn't quite identify. As the tournament approached, training intensified. Leonardo pushed himself harder, working late into the evenings, repeating routines repeatedly. The once playful excitement of dancing had transformed into something else: determination. Julian, despite his initial reservations, found himself drawn to every session, watching as his son evolved. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, Leonardo sat at the dining table, barely touching his food. Julian noticed the way his son's leg bounced beneath the table, his nerves barely contained. "What's on your mind?" Julian asked, his voice softer than usual. Leonardo hesitated before speaking. "There's another dancer in the tournament. His name is Santiago Beltran. He's won 2 consecutive years." Julian nodded slowly, and Leonardo bit his lip. "He messaged me, told me I don't stand a chance." Julian's fingers tightened around his glass. "And what do you think?" Leonardo hesitated, then admitted, "I don't know." Julian leaned forward slightly. "Listen to me, Leonardo. People only try to break you down when they see you as a threat. If Santiago is going out of his way to contact you, it means he's already worried." Leonardo's eyes widened slightly, his posture shifting. "You really think so?" Julian nodded. "I know so." For the first time since this conversation started, Leonardo smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Then I guess I'll just have to prove him wrong." Julian exhaled, watching his son with something close to admiration. He wasn't the same boy who had hidden behind books and routines. He was becoming something else, something stronger. For the first time, Julian found himself genuinely anticipating what his son would become. The theater buzzed with energy. Dancers warmed up in the backstage area, stretching, practicing footwork, and mentally preparing for their performances. The sound of music, whispered coaching instructions, and the steady rhythm of nervous breathing filled the space. Leonardo stood among them, adjusting the straps on his dance shoes, his hands trembling slightly. Julian watched from nearby, his expression unreadable. He had always been someone who thrived on control, but today nothing was in his hands. His son was stepping onto that stage alone, and there was nothing he could do to influence the outcome. Isabella stood beside Leonardo, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. "Breathe," she said simply. Leonardo exhaled slowly, nodding. "You've done the work. The only thing left is to dance." Julian studied them from a distance. There was a connection between them that made him feel like an outsider. Isabella had given Leonardo something he hadn't been able to, a sense of confidence rooted in passion rather than expectation. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to push away the thought. Now wasn't the time for reflection. The announcer's voice echoed through the speakers. "Next, we welcome Leonardo Lombardi to the stage." Leonardo swallowed hard. He turned toward Julian, searching for something: reassurance, approval, perhaps even permission. Julian gave a single nod. "Go," he said firmly. Leonardo stepped onto the stage. The lights were blinding, the audience's silence pressing against him like a weight. He took his position at center stage, his heartbeat loud in his ears. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if he failed? What if he forgot the steps? What if Santiago had been right? Then he saw them. In the front row, his father sat watching with an intensity Leonardo had never seen before. There was no judgment in his expression, no expectation of perfection, just something steady, something real. Next to him, Isabella gave him the smallest nod. The music began. Leonardo let go. His body moved before his mind could second-guess it. The first step was precise, the second even smoother. He let the rhythm take control, every movement flowing into the next. The stage became his world, the pressure melting away. He wasn't here to win, he was here to dance. The final sequence was the most difficult, a spinning leap he had struggled with for weeks. He braced himself, pushed off the floor, and for a brief moment, time seemed to slow. Then he landed, light on his feet, steady. The music stopped. A second of silence. Then the applause erupted. Leonardo stood there, chest rising and falling, his skin damp with sweat. He scanned the crowd, searching. His father was on his feet, clapping. Isabella, too, her eyes shining with pride. The results were announced soon after. And the winner of this year's competition is Santiago Beltran. The audience cheered as Santiago stepped forward, his confident smirk never wavering. Leonardo swallowed hard, keeping his expression neutral. He had lost. But before he could process the disappointment, the announcer continued. We would also like to present a special award for artistic expression, one that recognizes not just technical skill, but passion, connection, and heart. This award goes to Leonardo Lombardi. The crowd erupted again. Leonardo blinked in surprise as his name echoed through the theater. He stepped forward, accepting the medal placed around his neck. It wasn't the first-place trophy, but as he turned toward the audience, his father's expression told him everything he needed to know. Later, as he removed his dance shoes in the dressing room, Santiago approached him. Not bad, he said, twirling his own trophy in his hands. You might actually be decent next year. Leonardo smiled slightly. Next year, I'm winning. Santiago smirked. We'll see about that. Outside the theater, Julian and Isabella waited. When Leonardo finally emerged, Julian placed a hand on his shoulder. How do you feel? Leonardo thought for a moment before answering. Proud. Julian nodded. Good. As they walked toward the car, Leonardo glanced down at the medal in his hands. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about proving to himself that he belonged on that stage, that he was capable. Next time, he would be even better. Julian watched his son, seeing something new in him, something stronger. For the first time in a long time, he felt it too. Not just pride, but something deeper. He had spent so many years focused on control, on perfection, that he had forgotten what truly mattered. Not the outcome, but the journey. Leonardo looked up at him. Can I continue training? Julian smiled, a rare, genuine smile. Of course, we're just getting started. Julian never expected that a single moment could change everything. But now, nothing would ever be the same again. What would you have done in his place? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more content.